It slipped into my life after the divorce. Not with a crash, but like the silence that lingers once the laughter fades. At 42, I was still told I looked great for my age, though it often sounded like admiration mixed with sympathy. My name is Rachel. I lived alone in a quiet corner of upstate New York, where the lake glistened in the mornings and the nights stretched too long. My son, Lucas, 24, was my anchor, though he no longer lived with me. He had a job in Boston and only visited now and then, until renovations at his office and the end of a lease gave him a reason to stay for a few weeks. The stillness of the house had always felt manageable, until it wasn't. He arrived one golden August afternoon. I was drinking tea on the porch when he pulled into the drive, his grin boyish and familiar. His arms wrapped around me in a hug that seemed to carry the weight of years, and for a second, I held on just a little longer than I meant to. That night, we cooked together. It felt effortless, our rhythms syncing like old times. Elbows bumping, laughter threading through the quiet. I realized how long it had been since the house felt that alive. But slowly, something inside me shifted. Not in Lucas. In me. I started noticing the way his shoulders moved when he stretched, or how he bit his lip when he read. He wasn't a boy anymore, he was a man. And my heart, foolish and confused, began to race at the sound of his footsteps or the sight of him shirtless on the way to the shower. I knew how absurd it was. I hated myself for it. But feelings don't wait for permission. One evening, we watched a movie I hadn't seen since my 20s. Lucas had poured us a glass of wine each, and the warm hum of it made the room feel softer. He turned to say something, nothing important, but our eyes locked longer than they should have. "Mom," he asked gently, "you all right?" "Yeah," I whispered, though every part of me buzzed with alertness. Later, as I lay in bed, I could hear the sound of the faucet, his footfalls in the hallway, the muted click of his door. I told myself it was just the loneliness talking, that I was only clinging to the nearness of another soul. But deep down, I knew something was stirring. As the summer heat thickened and thunderstorms loomed in the air, I found myself listening for him. Lucas. The way his laughter lingered. The way his absence left a hollow silence. I started craving moments that brought us closer, whether it was passing him a plate or brushing fingers as we reached for the same spoon. That night, the air inside the house felt thick. I stood before my wardrobe, hands resting on a navy silk robe I hadn't worn in years. It was soft, luxurious, something I used to wear when I wanted to feel beautiful. I put it on, spritzed the perfume I once wore on special nights, loosely curled my hair. It wasn't for anyone else, just to feel like me again. But I wanted him to see me. Lucas was in his room, lying on the bed with a book, one knee propped up, hair tousled. When I leaned against the doorframe, he glanced at me and paused. His gaze flicked to the robe, to my hair. He looked back down too fast. "How's the book?" I asked, voice gentle. "It's getting good," he said, lips twitching like he wanted to smile but couldn't. I walked in quietly. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" He nodded, shifting up to make room. I perched beside him, eyes on the page, though I knew he wasn't reading anymore. "You've been tight lately," I said softly. "I can see it in your shoulders, your posture. I notice these things." He gave a short chuckle and finally met my eyes. "Yeah, probably from sitting hunched over this book all day." "Lie down," I offered, keeping my voice light but steady. "Just for a few minutes. Let me help." He paused, just a heartbeat, then shifted onto his stomach, folding his arms beneath his head without another word. I knelt beside him, the cool glide of silk brushing my legs as I adjusted myself. My hands hovered for a second above his back, then pressed gently through the thin fabric of his t-shirt. I moved slowly, tracing along his spine, feeling the tension beneath his skin. He sighed, a soft, tired sound, and I felt his body gradually soften under my touch. "You carry so much," I whispered, "always looking out for everyone else." "Someone's got to," he murmured, voice muffled in the pillow but edged with something warmer. "Especially for you." My hands paused, only for a moment. Then I continued, gliding up toward the base of his neck. He smelled faintly of citrus and soap, something clean and familiar. The scent curled around me like memory. His skin radiated heat.
So did mine.
Neither of us spoke again. His breathing slowed, deep and even, and for a few minutes we just stayed like that, close, quiet, suspended. When I finally drew my hands away, he stirred, turning his head slightly to look up at me. "Thanks, Rachel," he said, barely above a whisper. But his eyes stayed on me a little longer than necessary, on the edge of my robe, on the curve of my jaw. There was something there.
Something not said.
I smiled softly and brushed a loose strand of hair from his forehead. "Anytime." I left his room with my heart thudding, not sure where the line had blurred. Only that it had, and that we weren't standing where we started. That night, sleep kept its distance. Long after leaving Lucas's room, my palms still tingled with his warmth. I lay in bed, sheets twisted, the low hum of the ceiling fan useless against the storm inside me. I turned over again and again, chasing calm that refused to come. This wasn't what I had imagined for myself. I was supposed to be his guide, his parent, not someone lying awake, counting the steps he took in the hallway or memorizing the way he said my name. But sometimes loneliness has a way of distorting the edges between roles. And mine were unraveling. By morning, I hadn't figured it all out, but I had decided something. The day broke warm and golden, like a promise. I opened the closet and pulled out an old red swimsuit, classic cut, open back, soft against the skin. I slipped it on, layered my robe loosely over it, and gathered a few things into a bag. Fresh berries in a basket, a cold bottle of water, a small bottle of oil that smelled of orange blossom and almond, and one quiet secret tucked deep inside, just in case. The lake sat 15 minutes down a narrow forest trail, a hidden cove that locals rarely talked about. Lucas and I used to go there often when he was a teenager. I hadn't returned since the divorce. It felt right, though, like exactly the kind of quiet I needed. As I stepped into the kitchen, Lucas appeared at the stairs. His hair was tousled from sleep, shirt half-buttoned, still waking up. His eyes caught on me for a moment, then quickly moved on. "You're up early," he said, rubbing his neck, his voice thick from sleep. "I thought I'd head to the lake," I answered, reaching for the basket. "Get some air. Clear my thoughts." He looked toward the window, then back at me. "Want some company? I can meet you there after I change." There was something in his voice, not quite casual, not quite not. "Sure," I said calmly, though something stirred underneath. Outside, the air was soft and fragrant. My legs warmed in the sunlight, and the breeze skimmed past my calves as I made my way along the trail. The lake revealed itself slowly, silver and still through the trees, waiting. I laid my towel at the edge of the water and slipped off my robe. The breeze kissed the bare skin of my shoulders as I rubbed the oil into my arms, its scent mixing with the summer air. I bit into a berry, sweet and ripe, and let the juice run down my hand. And then I waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Only that whatever this was, I wasn't feeling it alone anymore. The sun had climbed higher, casting glimmers across the lake's surface like fragments of gold. I had just finished the last of the strawberries, their sweetness still lingering faintly on my tongue, when my mind drifted back to that nagging pull I'd tried so hard to quiet the night before. Wrapped loosely in my towel, warm air brushing over my skin, I leaned back and reached into my bag without thinking. My fingertips brushed against the velvet pouch, an old secret, tucked away more out of habit than intent. I hadn't imagined I'd bring it out here. But something about this place, about today, had blurred all the boundaries I usually kept so carefully drawn. I had just rested my hand on the smooth outline when I heard the soft crack of a twig behind me. "Hey, Lucas," Logan called out. His voice broke the moment like a pebble dropped into still water. I pulled my hand from the bag, startled, as though I'd been caught doing something forbidden. He stepped into view between the trees, his silhouette framed by sunlight. He wore only a pair of charcoal gray shorts, sitting low on his hips. No shirt, his skin glowing with heat from the walk. The light danced over the fine dusting of gold along his arms and chest. He looked relaxed, too much so for how breathless I suddenly felt. I blinked, smiled a beat too fast. That didn't take long. He grinned, his voice easy. Didn't want you getting all the best sun without me. But his gaze flickered, down my legs, over the red of the swimsuit, the slight sheen of oil on my skin. Quick, subtle, but not lost on me. He dropped his towel beside mine and sank to the ground with a soft exhale, legs stretched out, arms propping him back. I watched the movement of his shoulders, the way his chest rose and fell. Every shift in his body felt exaggerated against the quiet. We sat without speaking. The lake whispered at the edge of the clearing, reeds swaying in the breeze. Still, I could feel it, his glances, his presence thick beside me like the heat. I crossed one leg over the other and pretended to fix my sunglasses, anything to steady the rising flutter in my chest. You always tan fast, he said after a moment. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. Remember that summer we used to come out here all the time? You'd fall asleep in the sun and wake up 2 shades darker. I laughed, a little nervously, and peeling for days after. He smiled, but his eyes didn't move. Still, you look good. The compliment hung in the air too long. I said nothing. A beat passed. Then he stood, brushing off his hands. Think I'll take a swim, he said lightly, but there was something under the ease of his voice. Something we weren't saying. He walked slowly to the water, shoulders loose, steps steady. The lake took him in without resistance. I watched him disappear beneath the surface, then re-emerge, slick, shimmering, every line of him cut by sunlight and water. He floated on his back, eyes closed, hair slicked back, the water cradling him like something sacred. And I, sitting in silence, heart thudding steady and low, knew I couldn't pretend not to see what I saw. My hand moved toward the bag again, slower this time. I traced the edge of the velvet. But I didn't go further. Not yet. Because he wasn't just a presence anymore. He was something I felt. Deeply. And whatever line we were towing, it had already been crossed in ways neither of us could erase. When Logan returned, he moved deliberately, droplets chasing down his skin, his shorts clinging to his hips. He shook his head as he stepped closer, sending a splash of cold water my way. Logan, I laughed, raising my arm to shield myself, but the surprise made me smile wider than I meant to. Payback, he said, grinning. For leaving me behind. He sat down again, still catching his breath, the scent of lake water and sunlight clinging to him. I adjusted my towel, smoothing it out, then stretched out on my stomach, resting my chin on folded arms. I need a favor, I said after a moment, keeping my tone light. Yeah. His voice came closer. My back, I said, without looking. The oil's in the bag. I can't reach. There was a pause, just long enough to be felt. Then I heard the sound of the bottle uncapping, soft and distinct. And moments later, his touch, gentle, slow, pressed warmth into the small of my back, spreading oil across my skin in even, deliberate strokes. He didn't speak. And neither did I. His hands moved slowly, methodically, smoothing the oil across my back, over my shoulders, then gliding downward, lower. When he reached the dip just above my hips, I shifted slightly, letting out a quiet breath, pretending it was nothing more than the relief of touch. You okay? He asked, voice quieter now. Tighter. I murmured, barely audible. That feels really good. He paused for only a second before continuing. But his touch had changed, longer, slower, his fingers no longer pretending. There was a hesitance, yes, but also something deliberate in the way he mapped each part of my back, careful not to overstep, yet never quite pulling away. I could feel the effort in him, the self-control, and yet, every place he touched left behind a trail of heat I couldn't explain away. When he finished, I turned my head slightly to the side, keeping my voice low and steady. Your turn. He blinked. What? You'll burn without it, I said, sitting up slowly, reaching for the oil. Fair is fair. He hesitated, just for a second, then nodded once. Silently, turning away from me. His back was warm beneath my hands. I poured the oil into my palm and began smoothing it across his skin, slowly covering the planes of his shoulders, the dip of his spine, the faint curve of his lower back. I felt the muscles beneath tense and shift, and I caught it, that subtle hitch in his breath when my fingers swept just above the band of his shorts. I didn't mean to glance down, but I did. And what I saw confirmed what instinct had already whispered. He hadn't said a word, but his body had. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light that shimmered on his skin. The oil glowed faintly, a sheen of amber across his back. I moved slowly, trying to stay calm, though my pulse beat far too loud in my ears. I wasn't just being gentle. I wasn't just being careful. My touch was filled with everything I hadn't let myself feel.
Until now.
When I finished, I capped the bottle with hands that were no longer steady. Logan, still facing away, was motionless. I watched the rise and fall of his shoulders, the curl of his fingers against his thighs. And then, wordlessly, he turned. There was no teasing in his expression now. His eyes found mine, open, honest, and full of something deeper than desire. A truth too long buried. That grin he wore earlier was gone. What remained was real.
Raw.
He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. Not hesitant, not searching, but like someone who had held back for far too long and couldn't anymore. And I let him. I leaned into him, the sun forgotten, the warmth between us far greater. Our bodies fit together like a secret finally confessed, like the answer to a question we'd both been too afraid to ask. Breath and heartbeat. Silence and closeness. Nothing else remained.
We didn't speak.
We didn't need to. His heartbeat pulsed against mine, steady and deep. We stood there, entwined, letting the moment hold us. His hands moved slowly along my back, not exploring, just holding, just feeling,
just being.
And there it was, the rhythm. That deep, steady hum between two people who finally stopped pretending. The way his body swayed against mine, subtle and slow. The recognition of something long denied. This wasn't a moment we had planned. This was a culmination. A quiet surrender to the truth we'd both kept in the shadows. And in that stillness, under the glow of a fading sun, it was only us. Only this. We remained locked in that embrace until the breeze began to cool, the shadows stretching longer. The sun was lower now, but the warmth between us hadn't faded. Not even close. Logan eased back slightly, his hands resting on my hips. He glanced down briefly, then met my eyes again with a half-smile, soft, unguarded. "Do you have any water?" he asked. The simplicity of it nearly made me laugh. I nodded, breath catching in my throat. "In my bag," I said, motioning toward the pine tree's shade where I'd tucked it earlier. He walked over to it, kneeling beside the basket, lifting the towel that covered the contents. And then I remembered. I watched, helplessly, as his hand brushed the velvet pouch beneath the folded cloth and fruit. His fingers paused, lifted it slightly. And he looked at me. There was no surprise in his eyes. No confusion. Just understanding. A quiet recognition. No words needed. I felt a rush of heat climb to my cheeks. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I held his gaze and let the silence speak for itself. It didn't need to be explained. It already was. He gently placed it back where it had been, stood, and came toward me again. His voice was low, calm. "If you came here to unwind," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, "then lie down. Let me take care of you this time." His fingers touched the curve of my back, light and inviting. And without a word, I laid back onto the towel, my heart pounding softly beneath me, matching the rhythm of the ground. He knelt beside me, his hands warm, sure, smoothing oil into my shoulders, my back, the space between us vanishing with each touch. But before I could speak, before I could turn to meet his gaze, he leaned down, slowly, deliberately.
And he kissed me.
Not in a rush, not in confusion, but with intention. His lips against mine felt like everything I had resisted and everything I had needed. A gentle fall into something inevitable, something forbidden and sacred all at once. I closed my eyes and let it happen, not because I had lost control, but because I had finally stopped pretending. The trees stood still around us. The lake shimmered like a mirror of the sky. And for a moment, we were not mother and son, not figures bound by roles or names, but two people drawn into something deeper than reason could hold. And in that suspended world, we stayed.